Morning, everybody. Boy, you lifted me up talking about my great new phone, which I do love, by the way, the S7 Edge. I strongly endorse it. After it was announced that Samsung was buying Joyent, a member of the Samsung PR team reached out to me on Twitter saying, if you're going to be talking to the press, we really need to get you a new phone. I'm like, I emphatically agree. So I would really recommend, it is a beautiful new phone, and a beautiful phone. Very happy to be part of Samsung. So you lifted me right up with Samsung and my beautiful S7 Edge, and then you brought me right down thinking about how the office that I lived and sweated blood in is now some Facebook engineer. It's actually they've demolished the place effectively, so you basically can't recognize it. So I was at Sun Microsystems for a long time, and I've been a part I've been in and out of the Unix community for a very long time. And I am first and foremost, I am a software practitioner. So that term is going to come up a lot in this talk. So just to kind of give you my definition of it, I create production systems. When my phone rings and I don't recognize the number, I get nervous that it's somebody in a data center dealing with my software right now. The software I create actually runs in production the world over doing all sorts of things. So that is what I do. I don't merely write papers or blog entries and so on. I create the software artifacts that run in production. Now, for my entire career, though, I have been a practitioner on the leading edge of systems development. I've always been interested in exploring the new problems in systems, always with an eye towards production systems, developing production systems, but I've always been on the leading edge. And so for me, system software research has always been important, has always been relevant, has always been germane. I've always paid attention to system software research and participated in it. But system software research is only valuable to me as a practitioner in as much it is practical. If system software research becomes impractical, it is not interesting. It's only interesting as something not to do, which is somewhat interesting. It can be interesting, but it's not that interesting. System software research has to be practical to be relevant to the practitioner. And what I have seen over my career, over the last 20 years, is that practical bias has steadily eroded. And in particular, practitioners like me, leading edge practitioners, are no longer in forums like this at Usenix ATC. That troubles me greatly because it's the academic system software research, the industrial research that's being done is very important to me, and it's very important that we connect these two communities. But they've drifted apart, and they have drifted more and more and more apart. And Usenix is actually the preeminent organization supporting that research, and always has been. And Usenix has always and has done many creative things to try to support that research. And Usenix has been fighting trends that are bigger than Usenix. But I think that looking at Usenix, understanding Usenix, looking at the history of Usenix, can help us understand what has happened to system software research. And I'm going to give you my personal lens through Usenix. So I'm going to use myself and look at my relationship with Usenix over time, which is a good time to mention the last time I presented at Usenix. So the last time I presented at Usenix was not ATC, but Usenix Lisa. This was in 2011. This was a talk about the rise and development of Illumos, which is the operating system I work on. Illumos actually came from Open Solaris. And this talk went through all of the sordid history. This is, again, 2011. And it is potentially true that I was candid about the company that acquired Sun Microsystems. So I can't even remember what I said, but I remember that I only spoke the truth about the corporate sociopath that mowed over my beloved company. But the funny thing was that when the videos came online, actually I gave this presentation, and people were very concerned for my safety almost. It's like, wow, I can't believe you said some of the things you said. It's like, you don't have to worry about that because when someone doesn't have mirror neurons, you don't have to worry about them perceiving what you've done as a slight because they have no empathy. So it's fine. So I wasn't worried about it. I wasn't worried about it. But the videos for this came online, and all of the videos, because Lisa was videoed, all of the videos came online except for mine. And I'm like, no, okay, someone's just like misplaced the file or whatever. But this went on for a week or two. And my coworkers are like, this is a conspiracy. I'm like, this is not a conspiracy. No one cares about that. But the video did finally come online. Like, oh, good, all right, fine. Finally, the video's online. See, it's not a conspiracy. There you go. There's the video. But then there is something in the video that has never been in any Usenix video ever before. It's like, well, what the hell is this? You're like, oh, brother, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, the views, the statements of fact do not represent the views of the Usenix Association. Yeah, fine, okay. Got it. You're just like, okay, oh, brother, come on. I mean, yes, okay, fine, they might have been a sponsor of the conference, but come on. I mean, just have some courage, whatever. Okay, so you get past this, and if you've seen these Usenix videos, the format of them is you have the slide that you're presenting, you've got the speaker down in the corner, and which you can see the slide, you can see me speaking down in the corner, and then you can see the disclaimer above my head the entire time I'm speaking. It's like, just in case someone took a freeze frame of this, we wouldn't want anyone to come away with the impression that this is the Usenix Association speaking officially. It's like, oh my God, fine. Anyway, this is, by the way, if you're looking for kind of an apropos minute of this presentation, I mean, there are a bunch of them, but this is definitely one of them. Anyway, so that's the last time I presented at Usenix. So I want to be really clear because this talk is not being videoed. So, and I'm sure Usenix is relieved. I think that the cost of post-processing my video simply exceeds the cost of the conference, probably. So I think it's great that this is not being videoed. This audio will be made available, but not video. So for those listening on audio, I want to read this aloud so you understand that the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are emphatically, though I added emphatically, those of the speaker, and almost certainly do not represent those of the Usenix Association. And then if you're wondering about that, this is actually a Mark Twain reference, so don't get too worried. It's like, if I find a plot in this, I'm going to be shot. No, that's the introduction to Huck Finn, but it's apropos. So, okay, so we've got the notice. Everyone knows these are my own opinions. These are not the opinions of the Usenix Association. So let's move right along. So, I don't know one of the things that's kind of happened slowly, that does happen slowly, is I've become old. I am now old. I've been around for a while. And the Usenix that I knew coming up is maybe not the Usenix that some of you know. I know it's some of the Usenix that some of you in the room knew, but there are others in the room who don't necessarily know the Usenix that I knew. The Usenix that I knew, I lionized. As a young computer scientist, you looked at the Usenix was the collection of those who were working on Unix, and the conferences were amazing. They were rigorous, and they were presenting cutting-edge work, but the work being presented was broadly by practitioners, and it was work in actual shipping systems. And this is in a pre-open source era. In a pre-open source era, you had people describing their implementation for fellow practitioners who worked at rival companies. This is amazing, actually. And if you go back in the day, this is my easy litmus test for anyone in software systems. Go look at the proceedings of Usenix summer 1994 and tell me you don't want to be there. Oh my God, what a conference. And for those of you who were there, if it wasn't that great, don't tell me that, because I need to lionize this in my mind, if nothing else. But if you look at those proceedings, you look at those talks, you're like, wow, that's important. All of this stuff, deeply relevant, deeply important. That one is of particular note. I came to Sun to work with Jeff Bonwick. Bonwick published the slab allocator paper, was published in Usenix summer 1994, which totally changed the way we do kernel memory allocation. And it's been emulated by effectively every other system. It was part of the reason that I actually came to Sun. I read that paper and was energized by it, and loved seeing the thinking behind it. And I was energized that I could come do cutting-edge practice and actually describe it rigorously and formally. So, and if you go back to these old proceedings, they're amazing. Actually, I looked online to buy a copy of the Usenix summer 1994 proceedings, and I found 2 copies for sale. One for $29 from the Silicon Valley Goodwill. Actually, funny story about the Silicon Valley Goodwill. If you are ever in Palo Alto, definitely go out of your way to go to the Goodwill in Palo Alto and go to the t-shirt bin And the t-shirt bin is the cemetery for Silicon Valley. It is where dead technologies go, dead companies go to finally be buried. And you can buy them for a nickel or a quarter. One of my most cherished possessions is a t-shirt I bought in the Silicon Valley Goodwill with the top 10 reasons to run NT on MIPS. You're like, wait a minute. Yes, right, NT on MIPS. Seriously. This is an SGI t-shirt, and it had like the top 10 reasons. Seriously, whose dumb idea is this? And you should see the reasons. The reasons are terrible. Like reason number 6, spark schmark. It's like, even my 8-year-old doesn't think that's funny. I mean, and the number 1 reason to run NT on MIPS is it's so fast, it hurts, HERTZ. Which is just like, oh, God. So I'm sure to whomever owned this shirt, it's like, get this out of here and get this into the Goodwill right now. To me, I was like, I can't believe I just found this thing. This is worth millions to me, and I get to buy it for a quarter. So the Silicon Valley Goodwill is great, and I found a proceedings of the USENIX Summer 1994 Silicon Valley Goodwill that I scooped up. The other copy for sale was for sale for $20,000. And I'm not sure if it's like, that's a kindred spirit. Someone else values this the way I value it. It's probably worth more like $30, not like 20,000. But somebody else clearly values USENIX Summer 1994. And it's not just 1994. That whole era was a terrific era. And so like I said, I really grew up lionizing it. And when it came to be my turn, I was really excited to contribute to it. So in USENIX 2003, I had a facility that I had developed that I'll just describe briefly, a facility I developed in the late 90s, and it had really productized in the early 2000s, where one of the problems that we had on Spark in particular, Spark has had a software-loaded TLB. So whenever you have a TLB miss, you get a trap. And then that trap is filled by, the operating system gets the trap, fills in the TLB entry, and retries the instruction. The problem is that we didn't have any visibility into that. We didn't have any visibility into TLB misses in particular, but traps in general. When traps happen on the system, they're not system calls, remember. A trap is not a system call. And we don't instrument the trap table because it's too expensive to instrument the trap table. You can't even conditionally branch in the trap table. In fact, in the TLB miss entry, you only have 32 instructions, and you have to be extremely careful about how you spend those. We always used all 32 of those instructions in the TLB miss entry. So you have to be very, very careful about this, and I'd come up with a technique that said, well, hey, listen, instead of actually instrumenting the actual trap table we have in the operating system, why don't we dynamically create a new trap table that's instrumented however we want to instrument it, and then switch our trap table to point from this trap table into our instrumented trap table. And then we can get lots of interesting statistics, and then when we control C it, and we're not interested in it anymore, we go back to the actual stock production trap table. And this was really valuable for us. We were able to understand applications that had much more intensive trap activity than we expected. One of the things that you see is that you take an FPU trap the first time you use the FPU. So when we run a process on Spark, we turn off the FPU until you need it. Now, most applications, as it turns out, need it, but it was kind of entertaining to watch them actually take that FPU trap and us enable the FPU. Things like awk always use the FPU no matter what. So you can see things like that, but the TLB statistics were particularly important. And in particular, we discovered lint pass 2 of the kernel. I developed a little delicate, to put it euphemistically, technique to actually determine the amount of time we would spend in the operating system's TLB mishandler, and we discovered that lint pass 2 on the kernel has like a 30 or 40 meg resonance set, and then accesses it totally randomly. And on a 64 entry fully set associative TLB that's got a couple entries locked down and 8K pages, and you're accessing 32 megs or whatever randomly, you're missing in the TLB on every single instruction. So lint pass 2, which we in kernel development had always complained about the performance of, so it turns out it was spending all of its time having the TLB loaded over and over and over again. You're like, wow, it sounds like a software loaded TLB is a bad idea. Yes, but that's a different story. That's a different presentation. So anyway, so I was excited to actually formalize this and to write this up, and wrote this paper and circulated it a lot within Sun to make sure that it was up to USENIX's standards. So I really wanted this to be up to the standards that I held USENIX to be. And you know, of course, you know where this is going. It was rejected. So okay, fine. That's fine. It's fine. And it's actually especially fine when I learned about some of the numbers. So for USENIX 2003, there were 103 submissions for 24 slots. And I remember, I asked Bonwick, I'm like, wow, how did you get this stuff in? He's like, I don't remember USENIX being anywhere that hard to get into. That's crazy. It's like, wow, only 24% accepted. And like, when your acceptance rate is that low, I mean, there's an acceptance rate, when you drop below a certain acceptance rate, you are absolutely going to be rejecting things that you should be accepting. It's too fickle. It's too low an acceptance rate. And that's a low acceptance rate. I mean, it's ironic because we are so far down the path to crazy town that now feels like a very high acceptance rate. People are like, wow, 24%, man, back in the day, huh? It's like, no. That's a low acceptance rate. Whoops. I knew this was going to happen at least once. That is a low acceptance rate. That is not a high acceptance rate. That's a low acceptance rate. That's a dangerously low acceptance rate. It means that effectively things can be rejected for dumb reasons. And so, but when I saw the acceptance rate, I'm like, okay, it's not that surprising that it was rejected. But let me go read the comments. Okay, and let's see the reviewers' comments. And I read the first reviewer's comments, and obviously I'm not going to read this to you, but I read the first reviewer's comments, and suffice it to say, this is a spot-on description of our work. This just nails it. This is exactly what we did. And it describes why it's important. It's like, wow, that's okay. That seems great. Okay. Some suggestions for improvement, given the nice design. A port to Linux on Solaris be interesting. Okay, I'll suppress my rage. Fine. Good suggestion, fine. And any insights out of the port, the adjustments necessary for design. This paper is well aligned with the goals of the conference. Great, jackpot. And of course, I was young and naive and stupid. And what you should know when your paper has been rejected, and that's the first review, you should have like the ominous music playing in the background because you know what's coming. You know that one of those other 2 reviews or 3 reviews or 4 reviews is going to make you flip a table. But I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, because I literally am like, there have been 103 submissions of this caliber, and there was 103 things that they would admit, and they just can't admit mine because it's too small or what have you. So I'm like, okay, what's the next review? Next review, this is not as good a description with what's happening. It's okay, but it's not nearly as good. I have 2 problems with this paper. First, it seems to be too specific to the Spark. It's like, the Spark? All right, whatever. It seems to be too specific to Spark. It's like, it's trap table interposition, dummy. Of course it's specific to Spark. It's specific to any microprocessor you're going to run. But okay, fine. All right. It's cooling down. I would be more interested if the techniques were generally applicable. It's like, well, I would be interested in a fantasy utopia where we all run on a single instruction set too. Actually, I wouldn't be. That would suck. So that makes no sense. Okay, fine. It seems to overlap prior work in dynamic kernel tracing. This is before dtrace, obviously. And Richard Moore's dynamic probes seem to provide all the same features. It doesn't. I love the dprobes work that Richard Moore did originally on OS2, ported to Linux, but it's got nothing to do with this at all. So it's like, okay, I can feel like my blood pressure rising a little bit, like, okay, rage rising. I don't understand why the author thinks the technique is limited to machines that have a register indirect trap table. Trap interposition can be done equally well by simply replacing individual entries in a fixed location trap table. That statement is exactly correct in that this reviewer doesn't understand it. You're right, you don't understand it. That's true, you don't. And if you'd like, I can explain to you why this is wrong. Would you like? Sit down, trap table school is in session, and I will explain to you why this is limited to a register indirect trap table. Okay, so you're kind of like, you're like the eyes beginning to twitch a little bit, you can feel like the fight or flight reaction rising. The author doesn't do a good job of justifying the system. Table flip. Since he's already modifying the kernel, drift off. No sentence there. Okay, whatever, don't know what that means. Okay, whatever, okay. Then you get to, and this is of course classic, like it's the minor issues that really set you off. I've got some minor issues. Spark and x86 need definite or indefinite articles. Simpler on x86 is incorrect usage. You should say simpler on the x86. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you still say the x86 whenever you talk in conversation and sound like the jackass you sounded like in 2003. For your sins, I sentence you to speak this way for the rest of your life, because that sounds stupid. Okay, again, let's try it. Okay, talk myself off. And then you get to this issue. So then we finally get to productized is not a word, at least not outside meetings of marketing types who flunked English. Try, we may turn it into a product in Solaris x86. Okay, jerk. So a couple of things. One serious point. This is nasty. This is nasty. This is a nasty thing to say to somebody. It is only because of anonymized review. You want to say this to me, put your name to it.
I'll say it.
And there you go, good. Okay, well, wait for the next slide. So it's a nasty thing to say. It's a nasty thing to say, not to say that like such and such is not a word. That's fine. At least not outside meetings of marketing types who flunked English. Okay, first of all, I didn't flunk English. My English teachers, I assure you, wished that I had flunked English because no one did better in English while doing less work than I did, okay? I have the American indoor record for high grades in English with 0 work expended. Drove my teachers nuts. My dad is there, he's got his head in his hands right now. Which is true. I did very well in English. I did not flunk English. But I take exception to the tone. Marketing types? Who are these marketing types? Some of the smartest people I have worked with in my career work in marketing. And they, I can assure you, did not flunk English. Don't caricaturize the people that actually build things, please. And productize is not a word. Finally, that brings us to productize is not a word. In fact, it is a word. If you want to correct my writing, it better be a kill shot. So if you think I'm wrong, you better be right. And certainly, if you're going to be so nasty. The thing that's interesting about this sentence is that because I went through all of my correspondence at the time with other engineers and so on, this actually didn't bother me, which is kind of funny. As a 27-year-old or whatever I was, this didn't seem to bother me. At no point did I complain about this. Complain about other things and so on. Actually, I was more perplexed how I could turn this into a better paper. This didn't bother me. This is one of those rare things that makes me angrier as I'm older. Yeah, you think I'm angry now. You should see the young Bryan Cantrill. But on this issue, I am angrier now as a 42-year-old with 3 kids than I was as a 27-year-old. Why? Because this is not the way you treat people. This is especially not the way you treat people that are younger than you are. And assuredly, I was younger than he or she was. This is not the way you treat people. It is not uplifting. It is indecent. I would never actually say this to somebody, certainly not anonymized. So I've got a lot of problems with this. Let's move on. Review number 3. And actually, so ironically, at the time, it was review number 3 that really set me off. Because review number 3, this is the entirety of review number 3. There are no additional words other than this. And there's kind of like a snide remark, and then total gross misunderstanding of this work. Complete misunderstanding. Like, nowhere near it, and I won't walk you through section 3. It's not even in section 3, it's in section 2 that he's talking about, and he has totally misunderstood it. I love and then the tables for each MTU. MTU, minimum transfer unit, like over a NIC. I think you mean MMU. Should you be reviewing this paper? Why are you reviewing my work? Just out of curiosity. Am I just confused? Emphatically, you were just confused. Thank you. But amazingly, this actually was disappointing but not disheartening. I'm almost more angry about it in retrospect than I was at the time. Because I was like, okay, we just need to do better. We need to do better. And then the workshop on automated and algorithmic debugging, which is a workshop that I had always looked at, AA Debug, a conference that, as they say, you've not heard of for a reason. AA Debug was a conference that was held every period of time, of kind of varying period. And to me, AA Debug, automated and algorithmic debugging, is right up my alley. And I view this as like, this conference is only brought together when humanity has a crisis that requires these superheroes to be gathered in the same room. So you never knew when it was going to happen. Little did I know that it's because it was like an 8th tier conference that the guys had a hard time getting money to organize. But they announced the call for papers for AA Debug 2003. I lunged at it. I submitted some work that I thought was really interesting on postmortem type identification, for looking at a core crash dump and doing type identification on a C program. work that I loved, and they loved it. And it was really thoughtfully reviewed. It was strongly accepted by the reviewers. The conference itself was really interesting. It was small and a little bit weird. I learned about the Prologue people that we've been hiding in France, apparently, but okay, fine. The Prologue dead enders, I befriended the Prologue dead enders. But the conference itself was really interesting, and it was a great experience. And I was there with Adam Leventhal, who worked on D-Trace with me, and Adam and I at AAD Bug 2003 in Ghent, Belgium, vowed, like, we have got to write a great USENIX 2004 paper. Like, we know that the work we have right now is much more important than TrapSat and other stuff. Let's go write a great piece. And that is the dynamic instrumentation of production systems. This is the paper that introduces D-Trace. So this is where D-Trace was introduced to the world. It was introduced at USENIX ATC. I'm wearing the t-shirt from USENIX ATC 2004, which I still fit into, fortunately. But this is where we introduced D-Trace. And fortunately, this paper was accepted. Only 21 of 164 submissions now were accepted. You're like, wait a minute, I thought it was 103. It was 103 the year prior. We went from 103 submissions to 164 submissions. Like, whoa, what is going on? Acceptance rate now plummeting to a rate that you might be more accustomed to. And even in accepting the paper, the reviewers were tepid, which is fine. I like the review number one because they accepted it, whatever. But overall, this is a fairly solid paper demonstrating useful extensions. As an application level instrumenter, it still requires further defense. Is it under attack? Oh, yeah. Oh, it is under attack. I get it. Okay, fine. All right, fine. That's fine. Reviewer number two, in terms of new contributions, it does not seem that there are any. Additions to the language, associative arrays, aggregating functions, speculative tracing, those just seem like the new ones. And it is true that if you factor out all of our new contributions, we actually made no new contributions. It's like, how many new contributions do you want? Jesus. Okay, but whatever. Fine. But it was the third reviewer that is really of note. So the third reviewer was, first of all, much more positive, described some nice work, that's great, incredibly thorough, 1,300 words. And I didn't agree with all of it, but there was so much feedback. And the way he, because we know it's a he, finished it speaks so highly of the individual. I hope that helps you, Mike Burrows. People know who Mike Burrows is? Mike Burrows is a giant. Mike Burrows has an algorithm named after him. Mike Burrows was the CTO of Alta Vista. Mike Burrows and it was essential at Google. Mike Burrows, even at the time in 2003, was a giant in our domain. And for him not to just sign his name, not to just say, here it is I who have said this, but I hope that helps you. My intent is to help you. Wow, that was great. It was really great. And made the feedback much more meaningful. Again, not even where we didn't necessarily agree with all of it, but it made the feedback much more meaningful. Okay, so that said, the conference itself was a disappointment. The conference itself, because there were no other papers written by practitioners. We were it. We were the only paper in the whole conference written by people who were cutting code for a living, writing production systems. And every other speaker, and I don't mean to denigrate it, but it was very peculiar for someone who was not ready for it and didn't really realize what had happened to USENIX. Every talk begins with, this person is a great person, really sharp, and is going to be looking for work in the fall. It's like, am I at some employment fair? Well, yeah, of sorts you are, but I didn't realize it, right? Because this conference had become completely academic. There weren't even practitioners in attendance. In USENIX 2000, there were 1,730 attendees in USENIX 2000. I assure you there were not 1,730 attendees in USENIX 2004. What happened to the USENIX we knew and loved? Fortunately, it's 2004, and in 2004, only a couple months earlier, Sun had allowed employees to blog. The whole web blog thing was catching on. So it's and now if you're a decade or so younger than I am, you may be thinking Jesus, you actually are old. You predate blogs. Yes, I predate blogs. But yes, I'm a living fossil. But the new blogs gave us a hot mic with which to ask the pressing question. What happened to USENIX? What happened to this conference? Where are the practitioners? And so I blogged about it. Hey, look, I got back from USENIX 04, and we were the only ones. We were the only practitioners. And these are all PhD students at industry labs. And that's great. That's fine. But there's literally zero other practitioners. None. What is going on? The USENIX mission statement is to support and disseminate research with a practical bias. What is happening? And one of the PC members replied in the comments section of my blog entry. I am so old that not only do I predate blogs, I predate the eternal September in the comments of blogs. Comments on blogs used to not be spam. This is amazing. We used to, and actually it's funny, I went to this blog entry and you look at the comments, you're like, this is an amazing discussion. And it wasn't even notable at the time. Like, this is what we did back in the days. You know, we wore an onion on our belt, and we had actually meaningful conversation, really meaningful conversation, deep conversation in the comment section. And Werner Vogels, a member of the PC, says, hey, I've served on many program committees, including USENIX so far, and the hardest job is to get practitioners to be on the PC. I can't find practitioners to be on the PC. Every PC I've chaired, I've always leaned heavily on my industrial contacts to join in, and I always have failed. The same goes for paper writing. I can't get these folks to write papers. So the problem really lies in the fact that industrial folks claim there's no time to write paper as there's no reward within their organization for doing so. Now, Werner Vogels, if you recognize that name, yeah, it's that guy. So Werner Vogels is currently the CTO of Amazon. I guarantee you that Werner would cringe if he saw that comment. Not because he's wrong, but because he's absolutely right. And because Amazon has contributed so little Amazon has written effectively nothing and does not describe anything that they've done and is ridiculously closed. And we are effectively, we are replaying the history of Microsoft with, by the way, the same cast in charge. So Werner, but, I mean, that aside, Werner was right, spot on right. So I wanted to respond to that. It's like, wow, that's great. And of course, this is right before, by the way, Werner at this time was not the CTO of Amazon. He was the author of the All Things Distributed blog and a prominent researcher at Cornell, right? So that's who he was. But I was, wow, great, very thoughtful responses to my observations. We see the same problem. We see slightly different solutions, and we see, because I don't think that lies exclusively with industry, I think it lies with the academy as well. We really need to kind of come together. And one question I had is, in terms of the program committee, what is the composition of the PC over time? Werner said, the problem is I can't convince anyone to be on the PC. What was the composition of the PC over time? And so I went back through a bunch of proceedings, which is, if there's an automated way of doing it, I didn't find it, a very manual process. And I created this graph. This is program committee composition from 1997 to 2005, looking at the percentage that are from industry. Now, you're like, was this done in 2004 or 1984? Because that looks like it was done on an Atari 800. Yes, I know. So let me just apologize. I've got no idea. I knew GNU plot. I've got no idea why this graph looks so terrible. But anyway, leave that aside. So what we see here is a very clear, very troubling trend. In 1997, 100% of the program committee came from industry. By 2005, it was only a little over 20%. That is a collapse. There's not another word for it. That is a collapse. And I am, by the way, in terms of like, well, are you only looking at people who are practitioners? Are you looking at people who are industrial labs? I am taking the most lenient view of industry. If you work for HP Labs, you're in industry. It's like, but I've never done anything with code. Yeah, I know you haven't done anything with code. But what we're going to say, you're in industry. If you're in Microsoft Research, you're in industry. And if I took a less lenient view of who's in industry, it would be even sharper and even steeper. So even with that lenient view, you see a trend that is scary as hell. And I realized at that moment that like this has gone beyond an event horizon. I can't save this. I can't save this alone anyway. So where do we go? Where do we practitioners go? So yeah, there's a USENIX problem, but bluntly, in 2004, I had a much more pressing problem, which is like, okay, USENIX is dead to us. The acceptance rate is too low. We are not represented on the PCs. Where can we go publish? And fortunately, since 2004, we've had a lot of developments that have opened up new opportunities for publishing. Blogging happened. So this is actually one of the most important developments is blogging breaking into the mainstream, giving practitioners a zero-cost publishing vehicle. Because it's zero cost, I don't care that you think it's irrelevant or that I haven't said why this is a problem. I can publish it anyway. You don't need to worry about it. I can just publish it. And by the way, someone out there may find it's relevant, and it can be a very small number of people. And we would do this all the time at Sun. We would blog these blog entries that I know there are only 3 people on the planet who are going to be interested in this. But you know what? Those 3 people are my tribe. I want to work with those 3 people. So we deliberately wanted to publish things that blogs don't have a fixed cadence. There's not an annual blog conference. I can just publish when I have something to say. And if I don't have something to say, I don't blog. The medium itself encourages candor, authenticity, things that are very, very important for a practitioner. Practitioners want to consume stuff. Practitioners love to talk about their failures and hear about the failures of others, because it is failure that practitioners really learn by. So we want all that stuff. We want that candor. We want that authenticity. So blogging has been very important. YouTube happened. I mean, this is how YouTube is only a decade old, which is amazing to me, actually, because it has so fundamentally changed the way we disseminate information. YouTube is only a decade old. The very first talk I gave on YouTube was in 2007. So not even 10 years ago. And for me personally, many more people have seen me on YouTube than have actually seen me in person. In fact, I got a very strange experience. People are like, oh, I've watched all your videos on YouTube. And you feel like, okay, I need to not repeat any of my jokes. Because I used to be, back in the day, I could just repeat my jokes. I didn't have to constantly work on new material. To me, a conference is now the studio audience. It's going to be viewed much more by people outside the conference than in it. And in particular, and it does give me some perverse pleasure, that Fork Yeah talk, loaded with disclaimers about how this is emphatically not Usenix opinions, has more views than all the other Usenix videos combined. 77,000 views. Okay, I grew up in Denver. This is home for me. I don't live here now, but I grew up in Denver. When I see 77,000, that's Mile High Stadium to me. That's not, and this is not like some Invesco at Mile High or whatever. This is the Mile High Stadium to me, is 77,000 people. I presented to Mile High Stadium. Wow, that's amazing. And it's allowed us to get much more reach. GitHub happened. Open source has been around since the dawn of computing, but the rise of GitHub has allowed for much more information connectedness with respect to code. We can see one another's code. We can share it. We can file issues on it. We can express our opinions on the repo. We can make forks. We can collaborate so much more easily. It has lowered the barriers to sharing and participating in projects. It has been a watershed for the practitioner. And by the way, not to lionize GitHub, I've got plenty of complaints about GitHub, but it's undeniable that it has changed the way we develop software. It's a very profound change. You don't see a practitioner today talking about something they've done without a link to the repo. So ACMQ happened. This is another very important development in 2003. Other practitioners were also frustrated by the state of affairs. And Steve Bourne, yes, that's Steve Bourne is in the shell, in 2003 created a new publication called Q. I had the privilege of serving on the Q editorial board for 8 years. The Q model was a very different model. Instead of having a call for papers and everyone submit, the Q model was, let's get leading practitioners together over dinner and some wine maybe, and brainstorm what they want to see, the articles they want to see. Then when we know what we want to go see, let's find the right practitioners to write those articles and peer review them among their fellow practitioners. No blind submissions, no program committee, no acceptance rate. A Q author is assured that their content will be published. And as I told Werner back at the time, the biggest problem for practitioners publishing in academic conferences, I can't do work on spec. I can't do work that I won't know won't be published. That TrapStat paper, I've actually loaded to archive because the trap paper I wrote has never been published. That work, unfortunately, a lot of that work went into the comments of the code, but we can't do that as practitioners. We can't just invest work that we don't know won't pay off. So to be able to write for Q, and all of my writing shifted to Q. All of the writing, the academic writing that I've done since 2003 has been for Q. This is true for a lot of practitioners. The best practitioner authored content in the last 13 years has been from Q. We started publishing Q articles in CACM. One thing, just because I said I grew up in Denver, my father happens to be in the room, sorry to embarrass you, Dad. One of the things that we were able to do is my father's a physician, but has been working at the intersection of IT and medicine for his entire career, and we had him write an article on that experience. An article that would absolutely never be published in an academic conference, probably not even published in a medical journal, because it lives between these two worlds. And anyone who's cross-disciplinary has this complaint. My work is not truly understood or appreciated by either discipline. And we could take cross-disciplinary stuff, elevate it. We put that on the front page of CACM. Front page of CACM was an article that we never could have gotten any other way. So this worked, definitely worked, and that's where the practitioners went. So we disappeared. See ya, bye, we're gone. I don't know what happened in academia because I'm out of here. Okay, well in 2010, I was asked to join the program committee for the Usenix Symposium on Operating Systems Design and Implementation, OSDE. OSDE happens every other year, sits along SOSP as the premier systems conference. And so I was asked to join the PC, and I'm like, well, boy. This is before I had kids old enough to call me a hypocrite 8 times a day, and I was still sensitive to being thought of as a hypocrite. Now I just don't care. It's like, yeah, I'm a hypocrite. Go clean your room. But I was still sensitive to being a hypocrite. I didn't want to be hypocritical, and I remembered my discussion with Werner 6 years prior, and I felt that I owed it to the discipline to give my best effort on the program committee. And by being on the inside of that PC, I wanted to answer an essential question. Could the conference model be saved for the practitioner? So I don't think the Aussie 10 was atypical in its workload, and holy mackerel. You guys all know this, the folks that are on PCs. Holy guacamole, the workload. I could not believe it. I reviewed 36 papers. I wrote detailed reviews on 26. I wrote 14,000 words in reviews over a not long period of time. And for me, reading a paper is not quick. This is a 2 to 3 hour exercise. You read it once, you don't get it, you read it again, you get a little more, you read it again, and then you're writing the review. This is really dense technical writing. This is feedback going back. You want to make sure it's exactly correct. Oh my God, this is like taking 2 to 3 weeks off and doing nothing but reading and reviewing papers. This was all in my nights and weekends. This is time that I was not with my kids, bluntly, where I was doing this, and holy smokes, was it a lot of work. And definitely no one in the industry appreciates being on a PC. Wow. The problem was that with some exception, the papers that I liked, no one else liked. They were like, that's not very novel. It's like, yes, but it works. We put it in a real system. It's too small. And I found that I have got, not a surprise as a practitioner, I've got a great appreciation for the work that was smaller and it was far enough along that you could really vet the ideas. This is why it's so important, because there are so many software systems that look great up until the moment they're in production, and you discovered, how could I have been so wrong? Production systems give out near lethal doses of humility. And it's very important to us, to me, to see a system that's far enough along that you can validate it. Many a system has died just short of the goal line of a production system for reasons that are deeply architectural. So of these papers that I liked that people didn't like, there's one that's noteworthy. This paper on this thing called Nexus, a platform for fine-grained resource sharing in the data center. It was a way of taking a bunch of computers and sharing them among a bunch of frameworks that wanted to own the entire computer. And I thought this was neat. I thought it was a way, it was really practical. It seemed like, wow, this is a really practical problem. People want to run Hadoop and Spark side by side. This allows them to do it. This seems cool. But everyone else is like, no, this is just not interesting enough, not novel enough, but these ideas have been seen before. It's like, yes, but they actually did it, and it works, but okay, whatever. So, of course, all right, fine, rejected. Okay, fine. You probably don't recognize Nexus, but you probably do recognize what they renamed it to, Mesos. That's Mesos. This paper has got very little changes. They changed it from Nexus to Mesos. They did incorporate the feedback. I gave them a lot of feedback on this paper, and I was very pleased to see that a lot of it was incorporated, actually, and made it a better paper. So that was great. And it was published in USENIX NISD in 2011. And the work, now Mesos is important. Mesosphere is a huge company. MesosCon is a huge conference. Lots of people use this. This is relevant. It came from academia. It should be the model. You should say, how do we replicate that model? But what I found is that PCs don't have what we call in Silicon Valley FOMO, fear of missing out. If you go to any VC firm in the Valley, anyone that's been there for any length of time, they will tell you about the one that got away. They will tell you about the startup that they could have funded, that they were on the taxiway, powered up, that they could have funded, that they, for dumb reasons, didn't fund and took off. It's like, God, we had Dropbox. Oh, we had Pinterest. Damn it, I had Uber. And I had Uber like this. No one wanted to listen to Uber, and I had them here. And I could have funded the whole thing. Oh, my God. And it's like, and they obsess about it, kind of endlessly and annoyingly. It's like, shut up. Okay. But FOMO is very profound for VCs. And it is part of that institutional knowledge. PCs have no FOMO. There is no fear of missing out for a PC. There's no sense that, like, what if this is something important or relevant? And I'm not saying that we should have accepted that paper, because there were problems with the paper, problems with it that cleaned up. But it's a shame that we couldn't iterate on it and publish it in OSD. They addressed the issues that we had in a way that was great, and it made a much better paper. It should have been published in OSD, damn it. It should have been published in our Premier Systems Conference. And bigger question, who evaluates whether a PC made the right decision? We don't actually look back on that. Sorry, so back to the OSG 10 PC. So the actual PC meeting happened on, there was a Saturday. PC members are asked to attend in person. And of course, the meeting, and you guys have done this, you've been in PC meetings, you know the way this is, the meeting isn't for the stuff you agree on. No one's going to sit there for 8 hours and talk about the stuff they agree on. There's a small number of papers that everyone thinks should be accepted. Those you accept. There are a lot of papers that everyone thinks should be rejected. Those you reject. And then you've got those very few papers very few papers that everyone accepts. And then you've got all the papers in the middle. Papers where some people think they should accept and some people think that they should be rejected. Which is okay, fine. The problem for me is I was one of the only 2 practitioners in the room, and I'm being generous to the other guy because I know I cut way more code than he does. I was one of only 2 practitioners in the room. There are 25 people in the room on a 35-member PC, maybe more people in the room, but on the order of 25 people in the room. The papers that I liked had either all been accepted or all been rejected. And it left me in a really, really, really ugly position. Every paper, or almost every paper that we were discussing, was a paper that I was the one that said we should reject. And never alone, though, by the way. Never alone. Because the ones where I was just alone, they just overruled me and accepted the paper. But there were always other members of the PC. But this is a really, really ugly position. And there are 2 papers that are noteworthy here, which I'm obviously not going to give you too many identifying details. But let's call paper number 1. Paper number 1. Paper number 1 tackled a very important area. One that I happen to have a great deal of expertise. Had not seen much formal consideration, which was great. But the paper had glaring, immediately disqualifying flaws. It's like, whoa, undergrad level mistakes. Like, whoa, that's a whoopsie. That is not a typo. There's something very fundamental going on in terms of misunderstandings. And from my perspective, the authors had some deep misunderstandings, or to give them benefit of the doubt, the writing had glaring omissions. I was not the only one that felt this way. Of the 4 initial reviews, 3 of them were strong reject. Now, if you've been on a PC, you know, like strong reject is not that frequent, right? There's a weak reject is much more common than a strong reject. Strong reject is like, there is something wrong here in the animal brain of this work that cannot be rectified, right? So this is really bad. First one review, strong reject. 4th reviewer, very senior, very established, a giant in computer science, but not in this domain, does not understand this domain really at all, was a strong accept. Now, you also know how rare a strong accept is. You got 3 strong accepts and 3 strong rejects and a strong accept on a paper. I don't know how often this happens, but I can't imagine it happens that often. I mean, this is pistols at dawn, right? So part of why was he a strong accept? Because the OSD needs to accept more papers. It's like, okay, not this one, not the one that 3 of us think should be strongly rejected. And also, computer science has a reputation for eating its young. Yes, I totally agree with you. And by the way, productize is a word, goddammit. Computer science does have a reputation for eating its young because of this broken goddamn system. The way to fix it is not to allow in a paper that many of us feel is totally unacceptable. Long, acrimonious debate in the PC. I hated it. There were only 2 of us, thank God there were 2 of us, I wasn't alone, arguing strenuously to reject it because the 3rd wasn't in the meeting and then when he found out what happened, was very dismayed. But there were only 2 of us arguing against it. Everyone else was kind of silent. It's the 2 of us, and ultimately it was the one of us, me, just going toe-to-toe with someone who is, again, a giant in the domain. I refuse to give up. Like, I don't care. I'm not up for tenure. I don't care what you think of me. This paper should be rejected for all. And he was very confident that he had the votes. So he called the vote. He's like, we need to vote on this and move on. Fine, let's vote on it. PC rejected it. There you go, buddy. Oh, sorry. Did I do that? See, this is not being video. This is all, you only get the audio. So, yeah, those of you listening to the audio, you got no idea what I just did, and you'll never know. They voted to reject it. And, by the way, the vote divided purely on age. The older computer scientists who are sick of being abused at the national level because we eat our young, because we do, they were the ones that let's accept this paper. The younger computer scientists don't disagree with the fact they eat your young. We are the young that are being devoured, by the way, but this is the wrong hill to die on, and it was rejected. Okay, paper number 2. Paper number 2 is just a terrible idea. Paper number 1, interesting domain problems. Paper number 2, wall-to-wall, bad idea, deeply flawed solution, non-problem, easy reject, slam dunk. I've got a great deal of expertise here. Only other reviewer, also an expert, agreed with me, slam dunk, reject. But one of the PC chairs was a co-author. Obviously a deep co-author of 8 authors or whatever, however many it was, many more than that. So, and the reviews were outside of the online system, and I was stunned when it actually came up in the meeting. It's like, why are we talking about this paper? And of course, everyone like manages their conflicts with all of this ceremony, like, I am conflicted, I must leave. It's like, wearing a powdered wig or whatever, you're like, oh, brother. Meanwhile, like all your friends are still in the room. Everyone knows you're the PC chair that we're talking. It's like the idea that by you leaving the room, we've somehow absolved ourselves of the conflict of interest is a charade. And the room divided again. Same reasoning. We need to accept more papers. Fine, accept more papers. Don't accept this one. It's fundamentally flawed. It's an embarrassment to me. That's how bad it is. Another bitter debate. Again, we voted. Again, it was rejected. You're like, oh my God. See, coming out of that day, and on the one hand, it's like, on these key papers, like I guess I'd won the day at some level. These have both been rejected, but oh my God, it was exhausting and so negative. And everyone's like, you're a very negative person. I'm like, I'm actually not a negative person. I honestly am not a negative person. But you rejected all the stuff that I wanted because I'm the only practitioner. And they're like, you sound crazy. Like, I'm not crazy, you're crazy. And I know that I don't do well in those situations. I know that like when I am the only rational person in the room, I know myself well enough to know that's when people call the police and get restraining orders. So I know that. I know that. But like, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy, but I am the only practitioner. And it's driving me nuts. And you don't seem to care that I'm the one that's actually on the coalface of these systems. This is not just my opinion. I represent an entire way of thinking about these systems. And my conclusion was it is very, very difficult to be a practitioner on a program committee that's filled with academics and researchers. Oh, God, it was exhausting. Okay, then a few days after the meeting, the PC chairs mail the PC and say, hey, listen, we feel we didn't accept enough papers. We're accepting paper number 1. I was like, wow, okay. At that point, I was so emotionally spent that I'm like, well, this is ridiculous. I don't even care anymore. Like, I'm gone. This has revealed itself to be a total and complete farce. I don't care. Take the paper. Actually, why don't you take the second paper too, by the way? Like, as long as you're halfway across the river of blood, Macbeth, go all the way to the other side. Why don't you accept that paper? Oh, because you're a co-author on it. That's why. It's disgusting. And I was done. I didn't even reply. I was like, fine, whatever. The other members of the PC were out of their mind enraged. What does a PC vote mean? Why are we wearing the powdered wigs and having Robertson's Rules of Order if we can simply overrule the results that we don't like? It's disgusting. If I had any last shred of doubt that being on a program committee is an entire waste of time for a practitioner, it was obliterated. I was embarrassed for the domain. And I'm like, I'm not going to OSD, forget it. Paper 2 stayed rejected. I was like, oh, phew, I guess. So, okay, that's good. But about 6 months later, I got a free pass to a USENIX conference. I sent one of the engineers on my team. He came back. And this is like an engineer with a very high threshold for pain. He's of Polish extraction, grew up in the US, but very Polish. The thing I love about the Poles, if you look at the first ascents of Himalayan mountains, there are all sorts of nationalities. If you look at the first winter ascents of Himalayan mountains, it's all Poles. The Poles are a hard people. He has a high threshold for pain. And he came in lit up. He was really upset. It's like, I feel I've never seen you this upset while sober. And I had to give him a sobriety test first. But he was really upset. And he was, oh my God, I was at this conference and this parent table was terrible. I can't believe it. He starts to describe it. I'm like, wait a minute. I know that paper. That's paper number 2. And I looked at the paper. It's the exact same paper. I had all this feedback for why this is broken. There is none of that. You, as someone reading that paper, have no way of knowing that actually someone has looked at this and has a lot of reasons why this is very deeply flawed. So you're enraged, and you get enraged at the academy, but you shouldn't, because the academy actually worked to a degree. We gave it the right feedback, but it wasn't incorporated. Ugh. All right, so was OSD 10 just a bad PC? Okay, yeah, I'm sure it was a bad PC. It's a bad PC to a degree, but several of these issues are endemic. Operating under non-negotiable time pressure. By the way, we in software kind of figured this out. This is not the way you develop high-quality stuff. By schedule, quality, features, pick 2. Academia has picked schedule and features. What happened to quality? Yeah, what happened to quality? You can't have all 3. This is like CAP theorem for endeavor. You can't have all 3. Non-negotiable time change, inability to, you don't want to just like add a paragraph or a sentence, but actually new work. I want you to run new experiments, do new work. Let's do this over an extended period of time. Let's work together. Let's help each other get a higher quality artifact. And then we've got these low acceptance rates. Oh my God. In fact, you're looking at a 20% acceptance rate thinking it was the good old days. The low acceptance rates are a disaster because they result in conference shopping, which, by the way, lowers the acceptance rates. That's the way it works. They'll walk you through the math, right? That it's like, wow, I'm going to go now. I'm going to submit this paper to many, many conferences as it gets rejected. So we're getting more and more and more and more papers being submitted, and this is an unacceptable. I mean, PCs are under a huge amount of pressure, and they've got to accept papers that are substandard quality. And so let me tell you what the naked emperor is in this presentation. The conference model doesn't work. Stop trying to fix it. Stop trying to fix it incrementally. It is fundamentally flawed at its core. It is rotten. No other domain does this. We are the laughingstock of science. Talk to a neuroscientist at your institution and explain to them what we do in computer science. They'll be like, I'm misunderstanding you. What are you talking about? Like, so the conferences are prestigious? Yeah, the conferences are prestigious. But like, how do they possibly make decisions that quickly? It's like, well, it's pretty flawed and a lot of mistakes happen. It's like, all right. And then what they will ask you, anyone in any other domain will ask you, well, where are the conferences? We don't have any. We have deprived ourselves of true conferences by using conferences as the publishing vector. It's a huge mistake. Like, forget the suboptimal research artifacts, which are all over the place. Like, let's ignore those. Let's just focus on the fact that we don't have conferences anymore. It's driven the practitioner completely away. The practitioner is gone. And by the way, we're off on our own world. So you can continue to do this. You don't have to believe me that it doesn't work, but that's not my opinion. It actually just doesn't work. And it generates unsustainable workload for the PCs themselves. Look at the USENIX ATC PC size over time from 96 to 2015. Anyone want to sign up right now to be on the PC in 2030? Not me. No, I've seen curves like that. How about OSD? Woo! Oh, blowing out the speakers. How about OSD? Forget 2030. 2020 is going to have 8,000 people on it. And actually, I was talking to an academic about this. I'm like, do you know the OSD PC has 51 people? He's like, this is an academic. I'm like, only 51 people? That's actually not so bad. I'm like, not so bad. Can you imagine your younger self, your not tenured self, but your junior faculty member self saying that's not so bad? He's like, yeah, you're right, that's crazy. Is it crazy? It's crazy to have PCs that are that big. Okay, so what is a new model? We need a new model. Journals aren't the answer. So I'm not here to tell you that journals are the answer. They're not. Journals are just about to be disrupted, right? Journals are on the cusp of being disrupted. Anything that relies on proprietary information is a very tough business model. And journals there's going to be a revolution that's broader than just computer science that will certainly engulf journals as well and change the journal model. It presents an opportunity for us in computer science to pioneer a new model. By our nature, we can solve this. The greatest minds of our generation, in the very famous quote by Jeff Hammerbacher, the greatest minds of our generation have been figuring out how to get people to click on an ad. Like, we know how to solve this problem. And it seems to me like Archive is a great start. I really like Archive. How about a social networking aspect to Archive? Leave reviews, get reviews. Why is it that I can do this on GitHub, but I can't do it on Archive? Just star a paper. Like, just say, I like this. How about that? PCs could then form for the express purpose of bestowing awards on papers that they have all agreed that they really like. It looks a little more like a film festival circuit. And by the way, this is already happening a little bit. Like USENIX is doing this here. Many of you are here because you presented a paper in a different conference that USENIX had you in its best of the rest track. I love it. I think it's great. I think that that's a step in the right direction. So USENIX is trying to go in the right direction, but we need to go a lot further. We need to be a lot more radical because things are much more broken that we can't take an iterative approach. And why don't you take a lesson from every viral social app? Give badges for the behavior you want to encourage. It's troubling to me to watch my 11-year-old when he's on these things that give rewards for various things, and you watch this like Pavlovian, I will do anything to get a new badge. It's like, kill your parents for all right. It's like, I got a badge on Snapchat. It's like, oh my God. But give badges for reviewing obscure papers. Give badges for, I was the first person to say, this was a great paper that many people agreed on me. That should be worth something. I found this paper. I'm a paper finder. So we can do lots and lots of things. Give badges for giving reviews that the authors think are helpful. I'm the author. I thought that review was very helpful. Thank you. This made this a better work. There should be a badge for that. This is not that hard. Once we've solved that problem, we can actually get back to having real conferences. Conferences become more like practitioner conferences, and by the way, like conferences in every other grown-up scientific domain. Everybody goes. Lots of hallway conversation, lots of excitement, lots of great vibe. Let's get practitioners and researchers together. Everybody wins when we're together. Researchers get more practically biased work, and we who are practitioners get to up our game with more rigor and understand, actually, this problem, I'm not actually a special snowflake. This problem has been solved before. And by the way, there's the GitHub repo that the researcher just pointed to that embodies this new idea that I can incorporate in what I'm building. But you're like, oh, practitioners aren't interested in this. Yes, actually, they are. Papers we love. How many of you have gone to a Papers we love? Okay. If you are an academic, you must go to Papers we love. Papers we love is a meetup, total grassroots. This is the spirit of USENIX Summer 1994. Total grassroots in a lot of cities. You're like, well, I'd love to go to Papers we love, but I live in Kathmandu. Yes, actually, there is as it turns out, there is a Papers we love in Kathmandu. Actual, literal Kathmandu. Papers we love is a group, it's a meetup coming together mainly of practitioners who love academic papers. Your paper may have been discussed in a Papers we love. And not so some jerk could tell you that productize is not a word, but so someone could get up on stage in front of a fellow practitioner and explain why they love it. They love it. That's amazing. That's so much more positive. I mean, as a domain, we have to understand that people do things for that positive feedback. You do not train a dolphin with a shock collar. And that is what we are trying to do in computer science. And it's not working. We can be positive about this. Papers we love. Not papers we accept. Not papers we weak accept. Papers we love. And I hope all of you find a meetup near you, go there, present a paper that you love. Try to make it the one that's not your own work. Present a paper that you love. Maybe a paper that inspired your work. We need a lot more papers we love. And once we do that, and again, we can get a new model for conferences. Are we going to bring back the USENIX Summer 1994? No, probably not. But we can return to that spirit of the practitioner and researcher coming together. Papers we love is a concrete embodiment of this. We need these true conferences. And USENIX, USENIX is leading the way and is trying to lead the way. And a lot of what USENIX has done over the years, USENIX sees this problem too. And a lot of what USENIX has done is trying to improve this. And I honor that, and it's great. And USENIX, honestly, I wouldn't present this at a lot of conferences. I think USENIX is kind of qualified to hear the straight talk. But USENIX needs to be bolder. The model does not need to be tweaked. It needs to be sacked. And I know that's hard to understand, but that's what we've got to do in computer science. Papers we love shows that there is a love for high-quality research. And the good news is the amount of high-quality research is just the same, if not more, than there always has been. There's a lot of high-quality work out there. And one of the things, I wish PCs would spend their 8 hours, everyone discussing their strong accepts and accepts. Everyone would leave so much more uplifted. Be like, actually, we're only going to accept our strong accepts and accepts. We're going to discuss about how awesome those papers are, and then we're going to leave. Great. Done. So much more uplifting. So Papers we love shows that there's a path, and there's a path to a new model, and don't think that we can't change it, because we can. We can change this. This is our domain, our discipline. We are empowered. If we work together, we can change it. Thank you very much. So I know I've got minus 6 minutes for questions, so I know I'm eating into your break a little bit. I'm definitely around, certainly for the rest of the morning. I would love to hear your ideas on this. Just so you, if in case it's like, wow, you sound crazy. Okay, well, I'm not, maybe. But there are lots of people that see this problem. And I would really recommend you read, and a lot of these folks I actually have reached out to and discussed the problem. And you can see these titles are pretty blunt. The nastiness problem in computer science. Time for computer science to grow up. Should conferences meet journalism where? Incentivizing quality and impact. Saying that we should give people tenure based on quality, not quantity. This is great stuff. There's a lot of good reading. And I hope to discuss with you your ideas for changing the system. Great. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we're a little bit time over.
Can I say one thing, please?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, I want to say that I think that your experience on the OSDI PC is abnormal. Not all PCs are like that, okay? I've been on a lot of PCs, including OSDI. Generally speaking, you don't have chairs overruling people who reject things. Generally speaking, if 3 people give something a strong reject, it doesn't matter how many people love it. And I don't want other people getting the sense that things are that arbitrary or that they should stay away from PCs because it sucks so much. Okay, I think that that it just isn't like that. Okay, the other thing I want to say is that with respect to the model, you are absolutely right. And I was going to refer to some of the stuff you then put up, which is that you can, the reason that conferences reject papers is not fear of missing out, it's fear of being embarrassed when the bad paper gets up there and people come back to somebody and say, wow, that was a terrible paper. So they reject it because they don't know if it can be fixed. So a way to do that is to have people submit things in with major revision, whatever, and then have the papers that are ready appear at a conference. And the VLDB community is doing that now.
Yeah.
And
the rest of us, I think, need to move in that direction.
So VLDB is, and I should put it on the slide, VLDB is very interesting. What VLDB is doing is it's got rolling submissions. You submit to the VLDB journal effectively. They pull from the best of that. I think I agree with you. I think it's a good model. As for the OSD PC being exceptional, I mean, yeah, okay, fine. I agree. It was particularly bad. But even if that hadn't happened, the problems that I saw were still very endemic problems. And I think that in industry, we have to deal with this probably more frequently than you do in academia, where it doesn't matter how much I might love Spark, x86 destroyed it. x86 disrupted it. It doesn't matter how much I loved the old way of doing things, the new way of doing things is economically indisputable. And it doesn't matter how attached you are to the conference model, it is, again, it's not just my opinion, but I do believe it's fundamentally flawed. So I think, but I think we need to look at things like VLDB and the other things that are trying to find different ways, and conferences need to experiment with more radical approaches, and I think it should start with USENIX. But thank you very much for the comment, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Fred, for the comment. Just so everybody knows, this actually has been a comment almost every conference discussion topic, which is to review the model to see what to do about it. It is an issue. It's a growing trend in the sense that the community is growing. So 1994, that actually was before the internet was public, which is the issue. The community in and outside academia has grown exponentially. So that's the issue. But I think that this is really a charge to here within USENIX also to follow up and see what the best way forward is. There are some very real issues that were discussed here today, and it is a responsibility to move forward. So I do invite everybody to figure out to discuss, figure out what to do, and to come to USENIX, PCs, senior members. There's a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders here in the room. And so how to move forward is very important. But with that, we'll go ahead and thank the speaker one more time.
Right.